Hello, this is a presentation by Ludwig Max Fischer talking about Monte Verita and the Mountain of Truth in a larger sociological, psychological context. Monte Verita, the Mountain of Truth, was and is and will be an opportunity to regrow the tree of life. A meaningful, purpose-motivated, joy and vitality-filled way of spending the human biological time on Earth. Monte Verita was much more than a few intellectual and dropouts, outsiders, utopian dreamers, and crazy artists gathering to conduct an ill-fated, temporary experiment at the southern edge of the Alpine Mountains, where the European cold Nordic civilizations meet the Mediterranean warmer cultures, where the oak tree meets the olive tree, where cabbage meets the orange. When human beings form societies, there seems to be encoded a pattern of compulsive progressions from number one, a mystical experience, a revelation by a prophet, or an incarnate being of divine origin. Then follows 2, a small community of followers or apostles are receiving and understanding and practicing the message of the prophet. Number 3, the second and third and following generations of devotees who attempt to preserve the truth that they received, they convert into a belief system, into a code of conduct, a set of rules and rituals, a division of right and wrong, true and false. Number 4, as the time elapses and a geographic distance grows from the original inspiration, a privileged class of administrators establishes itself with guards and protects, ensures continuation, punishes deviations, persecutes alternative worldviews, and gains in worldly power. Very important that we have an inquisition if we have the right way. Number 5, as the stakeholders, there's always then some kind of a clergy of the belief system, expands his strategies of gaining power, is hardening into a very aggressive yang stage. YANG, use the Chinese terminology. A usually unnoticed or intentionally ignored and hidden loss of the content of the original message seems to grow correspondingly. The stakeholders of that established form, they start to burn. Then the deviants at the stake. I remember standing in front of the statue that was erected much later of Giordano Bruno at 1600. He was burned at the stake at the Campo de Fiore in Rome. And the Pope was watching from a podium higher than the stake. Because evil was eliminated. Well, what can follow after that? Happiness, obviously, or maybe the 30 Years' War, decimating the German population from 17 million to 8 million. So, rituals of attunement, the ability to connect to the original message by means of symbolic thinking. That is what diminishes. What rises and becomes bigger and bigger is pomp and circumstances. A few extremely then rich and privileged people. And grandiose spectacles replace that yin, Y-I-N, receptivity, to use the Chinese way of expressing this outward hardening movement versus the inward receptive movement. Now, number 6 here in that sequence is the story of Jesus to the medieval popes. And it seems to lead inevitably to Martin Luther. And analogies could be drawn to other civilizations, to ancient Rome, to the different fractions of Islam warring with each other. The fight for dominance, which is usually an act of despair of a ruling class to hang on to power and to its exclusive and excluding privilege, usually finds a way to enlist the lower class into deceptive, pseudo-legitimate reasons to pay blood tribute to the noble cause. Illusions then of defending, saving a collective in identity that is constructed and preserved or enforced, then with flags and songs and marches. And so the masses are usually then somehow become a fanatical, easily controllable group that is ready to die for the nation or for a particular political ideology. Now, there are people who have described that process. I think important here is Gustave Le Bon, The Psychology of the Masses. He had a major student, Edward Bernays, the founder of modern advertisement, upon which a lot of the major techniques of propaganda thereafter are based upon. So the rest is history. World wars and the inevitable total exhaustion of resources, human and natural, at a given time. So, the defeated enemies, the eliminated devil, somehow seems to come back stronger after a while. Similar to dandelions when they're destroyed, and viruses that are eliminated. In the 7th stage of the sequence, another superior, obviously superior, ideology asserts itself in the repeat stage 2 to 7. Oswald Spengler, in his monumental work, The Decline of the West, which, by the way, has not been very well translated, because the German actually says Untergang, der Untergang des Abendlandes. And that really means the downfall, Untergehen, that is when a ship sinks to the ground. That's the Titanic. And it doesn't decline, it sinks. It is really the sinking of literally the evening country, the West, the Occident. So we have the rise, the growth after the birth of a civilization, then the descent, the decline, and then the birth and the death. And he saw all of that very clearly in 1918. By the way, that's important. I think the kind of thinkers that in these first 25 years of the 20th century saw, but he was a historian. He saw what was happening, but the people of Montevideo actually acted upon it for their own lives. So, I'm coming to the 8th stage. An 8th stage seems to be a utopian illusion. Never feasible, never reasonable, never practical. A romantic aberration of ill-adjusted individuals who cannot or consciously refuse to get with the program. But there is a continuity of clear evidence for an 8th stage throughout history. There is another possibility. There is a way to integrate an understanding and practicing the stages of human life as they are repeated individually and in these previously mentioned collective sequences. An important book here, I think, is Ian Smith's 1926, the South African philosopher and statement, Holism and Evolution. Now, he shows that the conventional history books, in their chronological and analytical and factual accounts of wars and revolutions, heroes and villains, leave out another highly significant tradition, which provides a perennial treasure, a deep and high mountain of ignored truth, ignored and dismissed for all too convenient and effective, reasonable, very logical reasons. At any period of history, there were keepers of wisdom, awake, alert, and conscious, seeing through the flaws, the lies, the techniques of deception, the collective addiction to remain stuck in what Albert Einstein called the swamp of ignorance, greed, and fear, as he called it, ruling the human mind. Paul Levy calls these conscious dissenters the culturally creatives. Their wisdom is based on the value of the minerals, of the core substances that are in the mountains, the underlying harmony of the earth elements, creating and sustaining life on this planet, and the laws of nature, so detrimentally disobeyed, especially in these modern cities, where lifestyles, actually artificial, unnatural habits and conditions increasingly reduce and inhibit the gifts made available to plant, animal, and human vitality, eventually advancing towards a life-destroying ecological crisis. The guardians of life-affirming wisdom have as their main characteristic a resilience, a kind of immunity to the dominant ideology of the society they live in. They have preserved a memory. It is an inner memory. It's not the kind of memory that you store in gigabytes and terabytes. They have preserved a deeper understanding, as if having dug a well, discovered a source, an emergent spring, flowing continuously from the inside, the unknown, the not yet channeled into a riverbed with defined banks. I would say the original water fertilizing the fields that leaves the mountain of truth, where those deeper minerals, symbolically speaking, those not yet discovered sources, are actually waiting to be not mined, but becoming mine as a gift, not as something just available for arbitrary exploitation. Now, these guardians of perennial wisdom have gathered at all times in special places, usually in supportive natural environments, to conduct what the general public viewed as an experiment, an alternative. This is a very dangerous word, almost as bad as conspiracy theories, as a weird way of living. Now, something very important, because each one of you, each one of us, has to make 4 choices I really want you to think about. And what do you do towards this enforced socialization? Because the people at Monte Verita, they felt that this was not their highest principle to be obeyed. There was another inner authority that must be found, that must be sought, and eventually then followed as the path that you conduct your life. You who are on the road must have a code that you can live by. Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young. So there are 4 quintessential. 4 quintessentials? Well, there's a 5th one that is very different. Of what you must make a choice. I will talk about that in a moment.